The purpose of the Global CFO Council is to provide an educational and networking forum for senior financial executives in order to share best practices, discuss current financial issues, and to learn about current topics related to the performance of their jobs. Membership is open to senior financial executives including CFOs, financial VPs, and treasurers. We hope that you'll become a member of the Global CFO Council today. To join, please visit the membership tab at globalcfocouncil.com.
I didn't tell you this, but what I do is I don't read your bio, which was excellent. I find things on the internet about you, and then I reveal them just before you're about to get started. I find it really hilarious, and normally I show pictures that I find on the internet, and I have some of both of you, but for time, I'm not going to show them. But for $20, anybody watching, I will send them to you. I have wedding photos, I have family pictures. I got all kind of stuff. I got articles in the newspaper from when William was in high school. I got it.
It's amazing
Amy
what Google can do.
Amy Ball is the presidente at Innovative RX Strategies, I think living out of Madison, Indiana. And boy, she's a Boilermaker through and through. We got undergraduate in pharmacy from Purdue. We got a doctorate in pharmacy from Purdue and an affiliate professor of pharmacy at Purdue. Is that correct, Amy?
That is all correct.
And just duly noted, I did not allow any Indiana graduates to be present during this presentation. So got you covered.
Appreciate that.
Long career in all things pharmacy, prescription business management companies, manager, director, chief pharmacy officer, and now president of Innovative RX Strategies. And a couple of interesting things I found about you. I think not only do you live in Madison, I think you're from Madison, Indiana, went to, I'm going to totally mispronounce this, Shaw Memorial,
yep.
And played basketball on an all-state basketball team in high school. Is that correct?
Not quite correct. We never all state. We were a really small school, so I have to figure out where you got that information.
Well, I was trying to be nice.
Appreciate it. You'll find out I'm very transparent and truthful, so had to correct that one.
William, partner at RCH Benefits Advisors. I think living out of Columbia, South Carolina, or thereabouts. Before RCH Benefit Advisors, which is like a boutique employee benefits agency, got a manager, director of several health care benefits companies. I think you got your undergraduate in government at Wofford and a master's of health administration from MUSC. Is that correct?
That's right.
Went to Myrtle Beach High School. Is that correct?
Yep, that is.
League club at Wofford.
I was a bottom base in college. Yes, I was.
And a solid GPA and SAT scores from Myrtle Beach High School. I'm not going to share them because they're higher than mine. I think you're a fan of Teddy Roosevelt and the book 13 Days. Is that correct?
That would be correct, yeah.
Adjunct instructor at USC. We got all kind of education going here, folks. We got a instructor, affiliate professor of pharmacy at Purdue. We got an adjunct instructor at USC. So we're getting educated up in here. I'm going to yield the floor to you, William, and then I look forward to hitting you with rapid fire with some Q&A, you and Amy in the middle and at the end. Thank you both for being here.
Thank you, Robert. We're excited to be here today. We're actually coming to you live from the offices of One Spartanburg here in the Upstate. Amy and her team are in South Carolina all week, and we're having several meetings today with various employers in the Upstate who really are interested in the topic we're going to talk about today, and that's the landscape of prescription drugs and really what that means to your group health plan. And again, I'm William Render, partner with RCH Benefits Advisors. I met the Innovative RX Strategies team in May of 2019 when I was running a large self-funded association health plan. And one of the areas that just always bugged me was the lack of data and transparency around the pharmacy benefit plans. And so I found Innovative RX Strategies, was a client of theirs. They did a fantastic job for us and really opened my eyes to the world of pharmacy that really, by and large, is not very transparent. And from a contracting perspective, a pricing perspective, data. So reconnected with Innovative in 2021 when we started our agency, and have just been doing some great work with them around the state of South Carolina. I really like them for a number of reasons, but it's not just about contract renegotiation. They do everything from plan design consulting, claim repricing, and then really the data analytics and auditing capabilities they have. So I think you'll enjoy hearing this presentation today. Just some key observations and considerations as we go through this. I'm sure none of you experience this right now, but what we're seeing are pharmacy claims really being a main driver of overall health plan cost increases. Things like specialty drugs, cellular and genetic therapies. Two, we want you to understand the components of your pharmacy benefit management contract. So what's the difference between a carved in, carved out arrangement? What does it mean to have guaranteed pricing versus spread pricing? What does it mean to have 100% pass through of rebates? Those are all kind of buzzwords in the industry that Amy will talk through. I don't know if you've ever heard this before, that just the claims are what they are. We want you to know that that's not the case. The claims never are what they are. And there are techniques and strategies that you can put into place to lower your costs while also making sure that your employees and their family members, get the drugs that they need. And then number three, or not three, finally, how and when do I go about assessing my pharmacy plan? How do I look at my contract? How do I do an analysis on it? What does that look like? So just want to set the stage here for Amy, and she's going to jump right in for you. So thank you.
Thanks, William. Thanks, Robert. And good morning, everyone. Appreciate the opportunity to present to you today about the pharmacy landscape. We're going to talk a little bit about what we call the pharmacy supply chain, the PBM market. You may or may not know who your PBMs are. So we'll talk through some of who some of the big guys are and who some of the small folks are in the market that assist us with the pharmacy benefit. And then we're going to talk quickly about the different pricing models. I do a whole PBM 101 lecture for our clients. And generally I tell them you have to hear this 3 times before you really understand it. At the end of the day, PBM pricing is 7th grade math, but there's a lot of complexity around that 7th grade math in the contract. And we'll talk a little bit about that also. Once you get your foundation correct, which is a good contract with market competitive pricing, you really have to monitor that. And we're going to talk about that as well as give you some things to think about in terms of next steps. How do you do a self-assessment of your own pharmacy benefit management contract? So let's get started. The pharmacy supply chain, like I said, is complex. And the biggest issue is it really lacks transparency. If you're following any of the regulations, there's a lot of states looking at transparency and saying that we need to make this a transparent process. To me, transparency is the 4-letter word in the PBM industry because there is no transparency. You have some PBMs who say they're fully transparent. You have others who offer transparent pricing. And we'll talk about what that means when we talk about those pricing models. What I want you to understand about the complexity is it shouldn't be that complex. A member needs a prescription. They get a prescription from their doctor. They go to the pharmacy. They fill their prescription. They don't see everything that happens on the back end. And if you look at the pictorial on the right, where the complexity comes in is when you look at the different arrows and you look at the color of those arrows, they mean something. So the black arrows tell us where drug goes. So this is who actually touches or receives a product from the drug manufacturer. And it goes from that drug manufacturer, think Pfizer, Merck, AstraZeneca, AbbVie. These are the major pharmaceutical manufacturers playing in the market. They sell their drug to a wholesaler. The wholesaler then sells that drug to different providers in the process. The pharmacy buys from that wholesaler, and then they sell their drug to the patient. If you look at the prescription benefit manager on the right over here, they never take possession of the drug. Now, some of them own pharmacies, and their pharmacies will take possession of that drug. But the actual prescription benefit manager, think of them as a computer server. They're basically processing your claims. They never take possession of the drug, but they're negotiating price. And they are the middleman in this process. They are reimbursed by the employers, the government, health plans, third-party administrators, and then they pay the pharmacies on your behalf. And within there is spread and profit that is made, and we'll talk about that when we talk through kind of following the dollar in the space. The blue lines talk about rebates, and this is one of the revenue streams for PBMs and has been historically. We're going to talk about how that has changed too, to make transparency even more difficult in the PBM space. The contract language is key here. And so when we talk about market competitive financials, it's really important to understand how the contractual language impacts those financials. Most PBMs will write a contract that includes a lot of ambiguous language, sometimes difficult to detect, but that ambiguous language gives them the upper hand and the flexibility to manipulate the price that's paid. Generally, when I do a PBM 101, people start asking, well, wouldn't that be illegal? And it's actually not, because they have the contractual latitude to do these things and play these games that impact your financials. So what is a prescription benefit manager? They really came to be in the late 80s, early 90s, and they really were developed to process the prescription drug claims when insurance companies said, hey, we want to start covering drugs. Back then, I was just getting out of pharmacy school. The top 200 drugs are generally what we saw come through. And they were managing those way back in the day. H2 antagonist, think of Tagamet, it's now over the counter. Those were the big drugs back in the day, and they might have cost $150 to $200, and that was a pretty big deal. But as William said, now we're dealing with specialty drugs, we're dealing with $1 million gene therapies, and it's become a really important spot in the healthcare system to be a prescription benefit manager. At the end of the day, they're a computer server that processes your claims, but we've also delegated a lot of responsibility to the PBMs to set the formulary, to contract with pharmaceutical manufacturers for rebates, to manage the prescription drug plans for all of our employees, to select our pharmacy network and set pricing and reimbursement. Some of those things, as large employers, we can take back that responsibility. And as small employers, work with individual PBMs who are more aligned with our incentives, which is to offer a good pharmacy benefit at the lowest net cost while still being an appropriate fiduciary for our organizations. When you think about who the prescription benefit managers are, basically your big three, think CVS, Caremark, Cigna, which now owns Express Scripts, United Healthcare, which has OptumRx as their prescription benefit manager. When you think of the big three, they basically own 80% of the market. There are 70 PBMs or more in the marketplace. So there are options outside of the big three. There's a lot of larger clients who think they have to have the big three because they're 10,000 lives. Some of the smaller clients will use smaller PBMs and get still great service and great pricing. And so as you look at the marketplace, it continues to change, and we have a lot of options. I've worked with some large Fortune 50, Fortune 100 companies that will or will not use a big three. So as employers, self-funded employers, you have a lot of options in the PBM space. It doesn't have to be the big three, even though they hold 80% of the market. What we've seen over the last several years, and I'm sure all of you have seen this in the news, is we've seen what we're calling this vertical integration. So when you look at the top, you look at all these large health plans across the country, these insurers have purchased the prescription benefit managers. And so as you look at the Blue Cross Blue Shields of the world, you're seeing that a lot of them will use Prime Therapeutics, depending on which Blues organization they're with. In South Carolina, the Blues are aligned with OptumRx, and that tends to be their prescription benefit manager that they're using. But you look across this in that second line, and every single one of these health plans own their own PBM. There's a reason for that. And when you look at the earnings of some of these health plans and before and after the purchase of these PBMs, a very different story from what it was before they purchased that PBM. The PBMs are the moneymakers for these organizations. What's also interesting is we've known for years that rebates have been a revenue stream for PBMs. As William said, we're here in the state, going around with them, talking to employers. We've done some assessments where we get clients' claims and we evaluate their performance. And you see things where there are guarantees offered for rebates, but it's a fixed rebate. It's not 100% pass-through of rebates. And so we have known for years that rebates are a revenue stream. And what we've seen happen with the big three is they've created now their own group purchasing organization for the ability to negotiate with manufacturers for rebates. So now you've got OptumRx, who owns MSR, CVS Caremark with Zinc, and ESI with Ascent. And at Ascent, they've got several partners at the table as well. You've got Humana, Involve, Prime Therapeutics, and I believe Capital RX, a smaller PBM that has a different pricing model that we'll talk about in a minute, also one of the partners with Ascent. And then within that, it limits our ability many times to see how those organizations are negotiating for rebates. So now the PBMs can tell you they have 100% pass-through of rebates, but it's the rebates they're getting from their organization that they own that is negotiating rebates and obviously taking a piece of that rebate to account for the work that they do. We don't always have line of sight to what that is that those GPOs are keeping. So it created an additional lack of transparency into those actual rebates paid. The other piece of this is that, when we talk about following the dollar, we're going to look at these specialty pharmacies as well. So many of these PBMs now own their own pharmacies. They own their own specialty pharmacy. They own their own mail order pharmacy. And when you look in the middle, CVS Health owns their own retail set of pharmacies. So you're seeing this vertical integration happen where now these PBMs are owned by health plans, own their own pharmacies. And the question is, are the incentives aligned with me at the employer level to the decisions that I want to make for my employees? And that may or may not always be the case. So we're going to look through how the prescription benefit, where people make profit in the supply chain. And when you look at the manufacturer who makes the drug, they sell their drug to the wholesaler. So let's just take this example of a generic drug that has an average wholesale price of $100. And we're going to talk about what average wholesale price is and what the costing basis is for your PBM contract most likely. The manufacturer sells to the wholesaler a product, and they sell that drug for $1. The wholesaler then sells that drug to the pharmacy for $2. So they made their dollar in the supply chain. The pharmacy then fills a prescription for an employee, and they process that through the prescription benefit manager. The prescription benefit manager says back to the pharmacy, okay, I'm going to pay you $28.50 for that 30-day supply of that generic drug. The pharmacy then purchased the drug for $2. They make $26.50. The PBM charges you, the employer, $31.75. This is what we call a spread-based pricing model. The PBM, the middleman, they make $3.25 on that one claim, one prescription for that one member. That's what we call spread pricing. We're going to talk a little bit more about that. When you look at then a prescription benefit manager who owns their own mail order pharmacy, when you start to look at the contracts, they incent utilization of mail by providing deeper discounts at mail order. They're also offering that same deeper discount at retail 90 when you get a 90-day fill at a retail pharmacy, but you'll see that the mail order discount is even a little more aggressive than that. And the idea is to push people to the mail order pharmacy so that that individual pharmacy then is making that profit. And so if they can pull that profit out of the retail pharmacy into their owned entity, now where the pharmacy had made $26.50 on a 30-day script, now they're filling it at their mail order pharmacy, you triple that because it's a 90-day supply. And now the PBM pharmacy is making that profit instead of the retail pharmacy. So those owned entities are profit streams for the PBM as well. When you look at a brand drug, now you have to pull in the concept of rebates. So the manufacturer sells that brand drug to the wholesaler for $425. They sell it to the pharmacy for $432. The wholesaler made $7 profit. The PBM processes the claim that was filled by your employee. They pay the pharmacy $422.50. They charge you, the employer, $427.50. The pharmacy made $10.50. The PBM made $5 on processing that claim. Now, retrospectively, you're paid rebates, and let's just say on this brand drug, it was $85 for that claim. Then they are going to pass through $77 of that $85 to the employer, and the PBM is going to keep $8 of that rebate. And so again, on a spread model, and without 100% pass through of rebates, this all depends on the definition of your rebate, and that becomes really important in the contract. So then when you add the profit just for processing the claim to the rebate hold, now the PBM makes $13. So the PBM makes more on a brand drug than they did on a generic drug. So if you look back at the generic drug, they made $3.25 processing the claim. If they're retaining some of that rebate, then their gross profit goes up on a brand drug. Generic drugs are cheaper. As an employer, we want lowest net cost. We want to push people to generics, but the PBMs make more money on brands. The pharmacies make a little more money on generics. So there's a dichotomy there and a potential conflict between what we want to do as employers and what the PBM wants to do from a profit perspective. And so as we evaluate PBMs, we're looking at whether they own these entities or not. And so we'll talk through some of that as we talk through these pricing models. Before I get into the pricing model, I want to stop there and see if there are any questions, Robert, to this point.
Yes, there are a bunch.
Do you want to start? You want to do some now?
Oh, yeah. Is this a good time?
Yeah.
Question number one. This is my own commentary. As you talk about pricing transparency, drug pricing transparency in that last slide.
Yeah.
It seems designed to not be transparent.
Absolutely.
I think we could take an hour just describing that last slide so I could absorb it, that I have to be a masterfully knowledgeable about contracts and definitions. And it also seems like the PBM's profit motive is completely opposite of mine, that we're not set up to be partners, that they, in the seeking either the best care or the cheapest drug that provides the same benefit to my employees, they seem to have a profit motive of their rebates are much higher if it's a name brand. And so am I imagining things, or does it seem like it's not an accident? It seems like by design, it's not transparent.
Yeah, I think historically by design, that has been the case. And I think that's why we're seeing legislation now really pushing for transparency. And I'm not sure that's the right answer either. Because if we move to a completely transparent model, you'll see when we talk about the different pricing models, that's going to have a big impact for certain employers across the country. So I think from my perspective, it is I don't care which model a client uses, we want the lowest and best price. And so if you can tie the PBMs down through contractual language that's very detailed, very specific, uses national databases so that we're all on the same page, then we can assure that you're going to get the savings that are associated with the pricing that you get. But yeah, I don't think the model historically has been set up in a way that we're partners. It just creates that opportunity to really be taken advantage of. And when I can walk into a client and potentially save them 50% on their pharmacy spend, there is something dramatically wrong with that. And so, people get extremely frustrated when we tell them they can save 50%. They're frustrated with their partner, who was the PBM, and they're frustrated in the fact that it shouldn't be this complicated. And so, it happens every single day. I just ran an RFP 3 months ago where when we looked at all the different levers we could pull for this client, 52% savings.
We're seeing those results here, even in South Carolina, which is really why we're here talking about this stuff.
Across the board. I mean, minimal, just simply renegotiating a contract, we can save anywhere from 10 to 25%.
Amy, real early on in the presentation, you mentioned the supply chain, and there was a question that popped up around the global supply chain of drugs. There's nearshoring, offshoring.
Yep.
Certainly during COVID, it was a really hot topic. Any updates, any current trends around the global supply chain of drugs?
Yeah, I mean, if you're talking about international sourcing a product to lower net cost, what I've seen historically in that space is that people will tell you you're going to save millions of dollars, and anybody who's ever gone down that path comes back and says, yeah, we were supposed to save all this money, but we really didn't save anything. And the reality is, when you look at how we price drugs in the US, you pay a higher cost at point of sale, and then, 190 to 180 days later, you get a rebate on the back end. And what most people who are pitching international sourcing, they don't tell you about the rebate. They don't remind you that you get a rebate from the manufacturer after the fact. And when you look at true net cost, what I have seen is historically international sourcing doesn't provide the savings that we expected. And so if you cherry pick certain drugs where we know there's not a lot of rebate for us on the US side for that drug, you potentially can get those drugs at a lower cost source internationally. But you really have to evaluate all the price, understand lowest net price, and then decide which drugs you're going to source international. Because it's generally not worth the hassle and the risk, is what we've seen historically.
Clarifying question around formulary. So what is meant by the PBM setting formulary?
So the formulary, think of the formulary as your drug list. I always like to explain it as the, consumer guide. So if you're going to buy a car, if you're going to buy a camera, there's consumer guides out there that tell you what the best value is for your dollar. Think of the formulary as that consumer guide. So it's a list of drugs that are covered by the plan. So you have given that responsibility to the PBM. You're going to select what formulary you want. We can talk about that. There's lots of different kinds of formularies, but you're going to select that formulary that the PBM sets. And the point of the formulary is that the PBM, when a drug loses patent and a generic's available, they're continuing to work with other manufacturers to put other brand drugs on their formulary because they've just lost rebate on that big drug. So think of Humira, if you're familiar with that drug, number one, highest utilized drug in the world, very expensive, just lost patent, and we have biosimilars in the market. So Humira is a specialty drug used for multiple indications. Think rheumatoid arthritis, Crohn's disease, a lot of different inflammatory diseases. And that drug costs about $8,000 a month. Previously, we were probably getting about a 20 to 25% rebate on that drug. The biosimilars available, and a lot of PBMs have kept the brand version on their formulary because now we're getting about a 70 to 80% rebate on that because biosimilars cost anywhere from $800 to $1,000. A lot of PBMs left that on their formulary because they want to point to other factors that people aren't using biosimilars. And the reality is there's a 70% rebate on that. And so when you think about those GPOs who, this is a multi-billion-dollar drug, they're making profit on every single one of those claims that come through for that high cost drug. They don't want to lose that rebate. And there hasn't been anything come to market to be able to replace that volume of rebate. So we've seen a lot of the big three not make a move on the biosimilars, where if I'm working with other PBMs in that mid-level to small, they're making a move on biosimilars. They're going to those lower cost biosimilars. So if you have members with high deductible plans, they're getting that lower cost at point of sale. You're not requiring them to hit their deductible with a $7,000 drug. Now you can get that drug for $1,000. So from a clinical pharmacist perspective, we always back that lowest net cost drug at point of sale. You push generics and you will end up saving more money taking that approach than the other. And so again, it's the PBM making those decisions, which aren't aligned with how we end up having to pay for those drugs.
That's awesome, Amy. I've got some other questions. I think some of them you're going to cover in the next few
Okay.
slides. I'm going to hold. And then I'm
Okay,
going to hit you rapid fire with the questions that are queuing up at the end.
awesome. Okay. So we're going to talk about the different pricing options, and I won't spend a lot of time here because it's already 8:30, and this literally could be a 4-hour presentation, and I know y'all don't want to sit here for 4 hours. So, and we have a hard stop at the top of the hour. So average wholesale price, or AWP, is the industry standard for pricing. Most likely your contract, if you have one direct, is on an AWP costing basis. So it's a discount off of average wholesale price. It is a publicly available price. National databases hold that price. We can get AWP on 100% of drugs. That's why it's generally the costing basis for most contracts. There is a correlation between how brand drugs are purchased, and they're purchased under wholesale acquisition pricing model. And then there's a factor applied to wholesale acquisition costs. Just for quickness, we're going to say 20% markup off of WAC. Then we create a discount off of AWP. For generic drugs, the problem is there's no correlation with how generic drugs are purchased and the AWP price. And that becomes a big issue in terms of what we spend on generic drugs through the prescription benefit manager. Average wholesale price, a lot of people want to say, stands for ain't what you pay, because it doesn't correlate to how we purchase generic drugs in the market as pharmacies. Wholesale acquisition is how manufacturers sell their product to wholesalers and how wholesalers sell their product to pharmacies. There is a discount off of WAC that is used to price those products. And then AWP is calculated for brand drugs off of wholesale acquisition price. Now, Capital RX, if you follow any of the PBMs, you've seen them in the market talking about NADAC pricing. NADAC pricing is National Average Drug Acquisition Cost. It is a weekly, there's a weekly database published by CMS. It is based on survey data from around 400 pharmacies in the country. There are 67,000 pharmacies across the country, so a small portion report NADAC. The biggest issue with NADAC is that there's a high dispensing fee paid to the pharmacy, and NADAC is really supposed to act as a cost plus model. This works, and it can work very well, but we really want to look at your claims and understand, if you're with, if you have high penetration of CVS and Walgreens, their dispensing fee is higher than others. So you're talking about a $10 to $14 dispensing fee per claim. So when you talk about $4 generics at Walmart, and then you add on a $10 dispensing fee, you've now gotten rid of what we call zero balance due claims, which is where you as the plan used to pay $0 for those drugs. Now you're paying a portion of those depending on your plan design. So NADAC pricing absolutely works, but we have to make sure that it works for your organization based on your drug mix and pharmacy mix. Cost plus pharmacy acquisition cost. You have probably all heard about Mark Cuban and what he's doing in the space on a cost plus basis. Now, there's markup on that for them. Everybody needs to make a profit, and there's a cost associated with shipping those drugs. So it isn't the end all be all to your prescription benefit, but what Mark Cuban has done is shine a spotlight on the cost of drugs. And I think that has been a huge success for us in the PBM space to push the market to lower the cost of drug therapy. And I think we would not be at $1,000 biosimilar price for Humira if it were not for Mark Cuban coming to market with his $700 biosimilar. I think we would have been at about a 50% cost mark if it weren't for Mark Cuban really putting that spotlight on drug cost. ASP, we're not going to talk a lot about. That is medical-based pricing for infusions. But what I'm talking about today is pharmacy benefit through the drugs through the pharmacy benefit. You have specialty drugs that run through your medical benefit. That is the wild, wild west. You think pharmacy side is bad. It's even worse on the medical side. And whatever you're spending on specialty drugs on the pharmacy side, you're probably spending that exact amount or more on the medical side. And so we do high cost medical claim surveillance as well, because that's another place that you can spend a lot of money inappropriately. So AWP discount, as I said, that's the costing basis for 99.9% probably of all pharmacy contracts in the country. It is an annual aggregate guarantee or discount. The PBM has the whole year to hit those guarantees. And we often see the big three underperform in the first 2 quarters of the year. I don't know if that's related to earnings calls or what, but we generally see that underperformance early in the year. They have the ability to make that up through the course of the year. Generally, most PBMs will do what we call hard code the brand rate. So if they give you an AWP minus 19 on your brands, they'll hard code that in the system so that that automatically goes through the lesser of logic and determines the price for your member. But on the generics, those are managed with what we call MAC list, or a maximum allowable cost list. With generics, you might have 20 to 30 manufacturers of one specific generic product. And the price can vary dramatically because, again, AWP does not correlate to how we buy those drugs. So the PBM says, look, the maximum I'm going to pay you per pill for that drug is 10 cents. And so that's what they use for that MAC list, but that MAC list is adjusted daily, hourly, to be able to hit the rates that they've got in your contract. And so there's a lot more we could get into there. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that, but there is that back end work that goes on to determine how you as an employer are going to perform. The guarantees exist at the individual employer level or the health plan level and at the TPA level. So some PBMs will guarantee, some will not. And we'll talk about the different, transparent and traditional spread deals in just a minute. The interesting thing is you as the employer get guarantees, but there are also guarantees at the pharmacy level with certain pharmacy chains. Independents generally are reimbursed very aggressively, so they get deeper discounts on them than what we see on the larger chains. And that's what's really caused a lot of independent pharmacies to go out of business and to really have this uproar about how they're being reimbursed. All claims in the contract are used to hit your aggregate rates. Some of those claims will be excluded, and that exclusion is listed in your contract. We'll talk a little bit about that as well. And then all claims are used to hit that aggregate with the retail pharmacy. So think of this, you have a guarantee of, let's just call it AWP minus 84 on your 30-day retail brand or generic prescriptions. They might have a guarantee with the pharmacy, let's call it Walgreens, at AWP minus 87. So you're at an 84, the pharmacies are at an 87. They have to hit both of those guarantees. So as they aggregate all that information for all of their clients with those pharmacies, that's when we start to see how they're doing that. So the different pricing models that we have are a traditional spread model and a transparent pass-through model. So in a traditional spread deal, the PBM basically generates their revenue. When you looked at the follow the dollar slide, the difference between what you pay them and what they pay the pharmacy. So they're going to pay the pharmacy less than what you paid them, and they take that spread in the middle, and that becomes their profit. In a transparent model, whatever you paid them is what they're going to pay the pharmacy. Now, the difference is when you're working with a PBM that offers both models, every single one of those deals are a spread deal because they're using the transparent pricing with the traditional pricing, aggregating that at the pharmacy level, and you're not going to get as aggressive pricing on a transparent model often as you do on a traditional spread model. And I'm going to show you an example of that. So remember, this is an annual aggregate. So if you have a guarantee, so let's just look up here. If you have a guarantee as an employer of AWP minus 84 on your generic drugs, here's what happens. Let's say it's 100,000 generic prescriptions and it's a $10 million AWP amount, or what we call AWP load. You're going to get an 84% discount on that $10 million. So if you do the simple math, and I've got the math at the bottom, again, it's 7th grade math, AWP, $10 million times 1 minus 84, so 84% discount off of AWP, you're going to pay $1.6 million in claim cost for those drugs. In a transparent pass-through model, you're going to see, and you see this in every model, every drug is not going to adjudicate at AWP minus 84. There's some drugs that are less expensive. They're going to adjudicate more aggressively. And my examples here of all these 100,000 prescriptions, you're going to have a some at AWP minus 88, some at AWP minus 70, some at AWP minus 16. So there's variability in that. And this is where the PBM uses the MAC list as well to determine that pricing. In this case of a transparent pass-through model, whatever you paid for that claim is what they're going to reimburse the pharmacy. So if you look at the bottom, in the bottom blue circle, the pharmacy gets reimbursed $1.6 million for those 100,000 scripts with a $10 million AWP load. As the employer, you paid $1.6 million for those. But now the PBM needs to make money. They can't make money on the spread, so they're going to charge you an administrative fee. And let's just say in this case, it's $1 per claim. You have 100,000 claims, they're going to charge you $100,000. So as the employer, you paid $1.7 million for those 100,000 generic prescriptions. That's pass-through pricing. So now let's look at traditional spread-based pricing. All the numbers are exactly the same to keep this simple. In this case, again, look at the bottom, you're going to get an AWP minus 84% guarantee. Same drugs processed, same pricing, an AWP minus 84, it's the same math, you're going to pay $1.6 million. In a spread model, they're going to pay the pharmacy less than what you paid them. So let's say they're going to pay the pharmacy at AWP minus 88. AWP minus 88, again, do the math, 10 million AWP load times 1 minus 88% is $1.2 million. So they're going to pay the pharmacy 1.2 million, you paid them 1.6, the spread is 4%, and they made $400,000. So you got the same price, you actually paid $100,000 less because now your admin fee goes away. They don't charge an admin fee on a transparent model, but they're making 4 times what they made before in the transparent model. So we know this happens. So if we're going to do a pass-through, or I'm sorry, a traditional spread model, we say, no, 84 is not good enough. Give us a more aggressive rate. So if we negotiate now for you an AWP minus 85, now you're only paying $1.5 million. They're still spreading it. Now the spread is 3%. The PBM makes $300,000. So if we continue to push and say, nope, this is a big client, give us a better rate, they agree to an 86, again, 2% spread, now they're making $200,000. In this model, you're paying $300,000 less. They're making twice as much as they did on the spread model or on the pass-through model, and they're able to use this spread to meet their guarantee with the pharmacy. So as you can see, you know, a lot of people think transparent is the way to go. I like transparent model. It just feels better, but sometimes we can get more aggressive pricing under a traditional model, under a spread model. And that's what I said earlier. If legislation pushes us all to transparency, it's going to change the way a lot of clients end up paying for their drug. And for some people, it's going to cost them a lot more. And for others, they may see some savings. So yet to be seen what's going to happen on the legislative side. But the key to all of that is in those guarantees, what's included, what's excluded, and is it defined in your contract? So they can say, we exclude limited distribution drugs. Well, what does that mean? What's your definition? Do you have access to those drugs? Do you not have access to those drugs? All of that is the detail that we get into in the contract. And we require them to use the national databases that are available to define these terms. And we want that laid out in the contract, because if we don't, what inevitably happens is they have their own list of these things, and they're going to determine what that means without us knowing what that means. And I want to be able to take my client's claims and lay in that same exact definition and understand exactly what they should and should not be including in that guarantee. And we monitor that on an annual basis. So we've talked about very quickly a lot of intense topics, but at the end of the day, there's a couple different types of PBM contracts that we need to think about. So when you look at your organization, the first question is, am I fully insured or self-funded? If you're fully insured, your pharmacy is going to be wrapped into your health plan. The plan takes the full risk of the pharmacy and the medical. And what we generally see in a fully insured plan is they're really trying to manage pharmacy more aggressively because they're taking risk and they want to lower their risk threshold on that pharmacy side. And they're going to increase your premiums associated with what happens on the pharmacy and medical side year over year. So if you're fully insured, you've probably seen pretty aggressive increases in your premiums. If you're self-funded, you will generally have either what we call a carved-in contract, where it's carved in with your medical agreement through your carrier or your TPA, and it's just part of that agreement. Oftentimes in carved-in agreements, we see very little contractual language around pharmacy, and it becomes a place where we can create significant savings because you oftentimes are being gamed in those carved-in agreements if they're not defining all the terms and they're not giving you aggressive pricing. So we make sure that if you're in a carved-in agreement, it is a good agreement and that, we have good contractual language. We'll have them add exhibits to their medical agreement related to pharmacy. If it's what we call a carved out contract, it simply means you have a direct contract as an employer directly with that prescription benefit manager. And under those direct contract arrangements, you have your own contract, and we make sure that that contractual language is tight because that is the foundation of how you're going to perform financially. So when we work with our clients, we generally save 10 to 25% just in renegotiating an agreement. So that's no change to any plan design, even no change to the PBM. It's just getting your contract in the right place and getting you market competitive rates. We run many RFPs each year. And so that informs us about what the market will bear for clients of varying sizes. If you want to move PBMs and you want to implement other more aggressive pharmacy programming, we can save anywhere from 25 to 50%. We can also provide that significant savings on those drugs billed through the medical plan. So there is without a doubt savings in the pharmacy space. I've been doing this 15 years. There has not been an employer in the country haven't been able to walk into and save 10% right off the top. So there is an opportunity there. This is an example of some savings assessments that we have done recently. And in this case, this client had the ability to save up to 37%. And you can see kind of where those savings came from. Better network rates in the bottom left corner, no plan design change, better rebates. And that in this case, they had what we call fixed rebates, where they just gave them a dollar amount per brand drug. And now we're getting 100% pass through. And so we look at things from a network and a rebate and an admin fee perspective. And in that case, with just renegotiating their agreement, we could save 26%. And then on the other side, we look at the clinical programming too, and other programs that can bring savings. And when you add all that together, about a 37% savings. So this is an example, 5 PBMs across the top of the detail that we give our clients and show them what the savings potential is. And in this case, it was a 46.5% savings potential with PBM number 2. If you just look at the bottom line, I'm not going to walk through all those lines, but we lay this out very transparently for the client so they understand how we're looking at each individual PBM. And then, as I mentioned, understanding that contract compliance is important. We do an annual reconciliation of all the rate guarantees in the contract for every client that we have. And we're looking at whether they met those guarantees and followed the terms of the agreement. This becomes really important. If you don't have an independent individual looking at that, then you've got the fox watching the hen house because you're relying on the PBM to say that they did or did not meet their financial guarantees. As a consulting firm, one thing that's really important to me is transparency. And because I said it's the 4-letter word in the PBM space, it's even more important. And this isn't true with every single consultant. We take no money from anyone in the supply chain, whether it's manufacturer, wholesaler, pharmacy, PBM, or any other third-party vendor. We don't operate our own coalition agreements. We've been asked by many of the big 3 to create our own coalition because it's easier. But we don't do that. All of our contracts are direct with our individual clients, and we're paid by our clients. We're also PBM agnostic. I'll look at any of the 70 or more PBMs in the country that any client wants to look at. There are firms out there that only work with the big 3. They're paid by those organizations to bring in new clients and to retain clients. We're only paid by our clients, and any payment is fully disclosed in our contracts. I think that's important. If you're working with a consultant today, verify that, because again, you don't want an additional conflict of interest in this space. There's already enough fat in the system. So if you're thinking about, okay, gosh, a lot of information we went through today, think about how you can look at this for yourself. First, figure out if you're fully insured or self-funded. Then, who's your PBM? What pricing model do you have in place? Is it traditional or is it transparent? And what's the costing basis of your contract? Does your contract have minimum guarantees for price and rebate? What claims are included and excluded? Do those things look like they're defined in your contract? What's your definition of a brand drug, a generic drug, and AWP? Those are three of the most important definitions in your contract. If they're silent on those, you have you have a lot of potential for savings. Are your rates and rebates commingled? So if they overperform in one channel, can they offset that with underperformance in another channel? Or are they truly guaranteed at that individual channel level? Think retail 30-day brand generic, retail 30-day brand drugs, retail 30-day generic drugs. Do you have the contractual right to do that year-end reconciliation? And do you have annual market check rights? You can get very behind the market if you are in a 3-year agreement with no ability to check your pricing. And then again, like I said, who's advising you, and are they 100% transparent in how they perform their activities? So I know I've gone through a lot of information. I've tried to talk really quickly, and I left only 7 minutes for questions. So Robert, I'm going to let you rapid fire.
All right, I'm going to hit you 1, 2, 3, and feel faster answers are better, and you can even say yes or no. And
Okay.
I'll hit you with the next question. One question that I got is, I'm going to lump some together here, is around GoodRx, the cost of drugs, and how wildly different the price can be to the consumer depending on which place you go. If like you use the GoodRx app,
Yep.
it'll show you within 2 miles of you, the price can be $313 or $13. Or if you walk in and say, I have insurance, your price can be higher. If you just say, hey, I'm a cash buyer, what's your price? What is going on?
So remember the MAC list I talked about. So the PBM is adjusting that MAC list to hit those guarantees. And depending on your drug mix, again, MAC list is going to change rapidly and frequently. They're adjusting your price on a daily basis. GoodRx has a discount in place with pharmacies, and oftentimes GoodRx is lower for generic drugs. Generally don't see that on the brand side, but on the generic side. And so there have been a lot of complaints by employees. Why am I paying you a premium if you can't even negotiate anything better than what I can get myself? And so what PBMs have done is they've created now an opportunity that if GoodRx is lower price, they make that part of their adjudication logic, and now that claim can be part of the plan. A little bit complicated, happy to walk somebody through that, but it is unfortunate, and there's been a lot of complaints. And so the PBMs have all come to the table and said, okay, if that price is lower and it lowers the member cost, we'll use GoodRx as part of our logic. If it lowers the plan cost only and doesn't impact the member, they're not going to use it. So they're not doing it really in the best interest of you, the plan, but to avoid some of the issues that you're hearing from the member side.
You mentioned
lots to unpack there as well.
You mentioned regulation and legislation, and also I feel like I've heard something as part of the Inflation Reduction Act. Is that what you're talking about, or is there other regulation and legislation coming down the pipe that is specific to pharmacy?
Yeah, there's other regulation as well. So the Inflation Reduction Act, very interesting. It's going to be an interesting year to reconcile rebates, because one of the things that's happening in that space is they're saying, hey, we know these drugs are coming down and they were at risk for pharma, so they just lowered their price. And again, a lot to unpack there, but they're doing what's called a rebate credit. So now you may get these large rebate guarantees in your contract, but they're not real. What they're doing is saying, you're going to get that savings at point of sale, but because we used to get a lot of rebate on that, we're going to take a rebate credit. And we're going to say, okay, if you pay $1,000 at point of sale now, instead of $8,000, that $7,000 difference is rebate credit. And we're going to call it a rebate because you got it up front, but we don't get rebate anymore but we don't want to rewrite your contract, so we'll call it rebate. And I see that being a game over the years as inflation happens. That number is going to get larger. And again, remember, we've got these GPOs that are isolated now. If they're keeping more rebate and now they can apply more rebate credit to our guarantees, it's going to end up being a game. So we've got some ways to mitigate that in terms of how we're negotiating those agreements. But the Inflation Reduction Act is going to be really interesting over the next couple of years. There is other regulation happening as well. So we've seen, like West Virginia requires NADAC pricing, and that is more transparent pricing. And so we're seeing other states jump into that, pushing for transparency and saying, we don't care about ERISA preemption. And so where you used to be protected by ERISA, state laws and regulations are just going into place and saying, hey, PBM, you got to conform or we're not going to let you practice in the state.
And the state of Florida has actually done a lot of work around that too.
Yep.
I would encourage folks to look up the PBM transparency law that they just passed. And I think a lot of state legislators, seeing the lack of progress made in Washington, D.C., have said, hey, we're going to take this on ourselves within our own state. And so Florida's law even eliminates things. It eliminates spread pricing. It requires not just, rebate transparency back to the employers, but it requires TPAs and carriers who may have these carved in arrangements to disclose all fees and revenues related to, the PBM pricing and whatnot. So I think you're seeing a shift in the country nationally, but more, I think, states starting to push it.
And then it becomes difficult. If you're a national organization, you have to deal with all these different state regulations. It's going to make it impossible to do anything other than transparent pricing. And so we monitor that. We work with the PBMs for these national organizations to make sure that, we understand what's happening. And through the last 2 RFP seasons, we've asked each PBM to bid both traditional and transparent pricing, so that if there is a point that we have to transition to transparent, we've already got those rates documented in the contract.
This was excellent. Absolutely fantastic. What a great slide 26 that identified takeaways. What a great sit down conversation starter with HR, your broker, your partner in this space, and see if they have answers to these questions. And if not, you might need to pull in another amazing resource like Amy and William. This is the second largest category that we have to deal with often on many of our P&Ls. So this is a really important thing to be taking a look at. I've recently listened to that Mark Cuban podcast on Cost Plus, and he says really need to be hiring CEOs and CFOs who are experts in this area. I'm not, you're probably not. And so it's nice. And I guess what? Your HR person also isn't. They probably barely passed math, accounting, and finance. That's why they're in HR. And so they need us. We're not experts. We need Amy and William. I'm going to share this presentation and their contact information so that when we can pick up the red bat phone and give a call to these amazing resources. Thank you all so much. And everyone, have a wonderful day. Goodbye.
Thanks, Robert.
Appreciate it.